Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Krista Hestorfer. I'm here from Hunger Solutions New York, and I am so pleased to be joined by my colleagues, Ryan Healy, also with Hunger Solutions New York, Eric Kreller from Field and Fork Network, and Alyssa Harry-Nannen from Feeding New York State. We are so glad that you've chosen to join us this morning for the third annual Forum on Hunger and Food Insecurity in New York State. Today's webinar will be recorded, and you will also receive the slide deck, so you'll be able to access all of the hyperlinks and calls to action that we'll be sharing with you today. As Eric mentioned in the chat, you can submit questions through the Q&A feature, and thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions as part of the registration process. Hopefully we will see those answers incorporated throughout today, but certainly we want to capture any additional questions you may have. We have an excellent lineup for you today. We'll start with just a brief overview of some of the key anti-hunger priorities heading into this year's state budget. Then you'll hear from several community advocates who are working on the ground in various capacities, and they will share what they're seeing and why these priorities are so important for their communities. After that, we have a great legislative panel with some of our champions who are advancing these priorities in the Assembly and the Senate. And of course, throughout the webinar, you'll hear some calls to action of ways that you can get involved in advocacy. But first, let's set the stage. Food insecurity, when we're talking about that today, we're talking about inconsistent or unreliable access to enough healthy food to live an active life, and specifically an inability to access that food because of financial or economic constraints. Unfortunately, food insecurity is a persistent and pervasive problem in New York State. As of the most recent USDA food security report, more than 12% of New Yorkers experienced food insecurity on average between 2021 and 2023. We also know that food insecurity does not affect everyone equally. It has disproportionate impacts on communities of color and households with children. Because of historic, long-standing systemic inequities, Black and Hispanic households experience food insecurity at more than twice the rate of white households. And Feeding America estimates that 19% of New York State's children, that's about 1 in 5, experienced food insecurity as of 2023. The data that we're talking about is hard to hear. It's heartbreaking, it's infuriating, and it's also really important for us to understand how food insecurity is affecting New Yorkers. So I would be remiss not to mention that USDA is planning to discontinue both the collection and reporting of food insecurity data moving forward. That will make it harder for us to monitor and respond to trends and disparities in food insecurity, and it will especially make it harder to monitor the impacts of harmful federal policies that will be rolling out over the next several years and that are widely anticipated to increase food insecurity here in New York. One of the most powerful tools we have for mitigating food insecurity is SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is our nation's largest and most effective anti-hunger program. It provides EBT food benefits for nearly 3 million New Yorkers. The vast majority of New York SNAP participants are children, seniors, or people with disabilities. And we all saw firsthand during the shutdown in November how disruptive it was for people to see a delay or uncertainty about receiving their SNAP benefits. That experience really underscored the critical importance of SNAP for alleviating food insecurity in New York, but also the need for us to shore up and bolster this program at the state level in any way that we can. As you all probably know by now, we are looking at some deeply harmful federal cuts to SNAP, thanks to the budget reconciliation bill that was passed over the summer. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or as I'll call it, HR 1, included the largest cut to SNAP in American history. About $187 billion will be cut from the program over the next 10 years. HR 1 made those cuts in a handful of different ways. It limits eligibility by expanding work reporting requirements to more people who were previously exempt. and it restricts a state's ability to waive those reporting requirements in areas where there are insufficient jobs. So after March of this year, New York will no longer qualify for a waiver that minimized the harm of work reporting requirements for many years. It also changes immigrant eligibility criteria for SNAP in a way that will jeopardize access for about 41,000 refugees and asylees here in New York State. The bill reduces benefit adequacy by making changes to budgeting rules and restricting future updates to the USDA's Thrifty Food Plan, which is used as the basis of SNAP benefit amounts. And it shifts considerable costs from the state government from the federal government rather, onto state and county governments. First, we'll see a cut to federal funding for SNAP administration. Those funds will be cut in half. So state and county governments will have to cover that balance and keep the program running. But then in future years, it will also shift a portion of the actual food benefit costs that have always been 100% federally funded onto state budgets, as much as 15% New York State's budget will have to cover. All of those changes to SNAP will be deeply harmful. They will increase food insecurity in New York, but there are things that we can do and things that New York State can do to minimize harm from HR 1. First, we must protect and strengthen SNAP at the state level by backfilling those cuts that I just talked about to federal administrative funding. Included in that cut is a 50% cut to federal funding for SNAP outreach and application assistance, including through the Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And there was also a complete elimination of funding for the SNAP Ed program that provides nutrition education for SNAP participants and other low-income households with the goal of helping them stretch their budgets further. We also need to protect the SNAP benefits that people do receive by ensuring New York can transition to more secure EBT chip cards. And we should look at opportunities for the state to supplement SNAP, to increase the minimum benefit so that it's more adequate for folks to cover a month of grocery costs, and to make sure that we are providing food benefits to families who would be eligible for SNAP, but they're excluded from the program solely due to their immigration status. Programs like Double Up Food Bucks also go a long way in increasing the purchasing power of SNAP, expanding the reach of the program in New York. In addition to protecting and strengthening SNAP, we need to bolster other nutrition programs like WIC that remain available for families and are a critical source of nutrition and public health support amid these federal cuts. We need to increase investments in our emergency food system, programs like Nourish New York and HIPNAP, so that our food banks and food pantries can respond to an increased demand. And of course, we need to sustain the historic investments that New York has already made, including universal school meals and summer EBT. We're going to take a minute to walk through a handful of these priorities in just a little bit more detail before we get to our panels. I'm going to start with the Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, or NOEP. NOEP is a statewide network of more than 80 SNAP navigators who help families through every step of the application process, from conducting outreach to make sure families are aware of SNAP, to helping them submit an application, gather their documents, smooth over any barriers that they may run into in the process. Last year, NOEP helped nearly 30,000 households successfully apply for SNAP. This program is always a critical resource for families, but especially now, as these complex and harmful federal policy changes are rolling out, it's critical for NOEP's SNAP navigators to be available in every part of the state. Unfortunately, NOEP, as I mentioned earlier, was included in the 50% cut to federal funding for SNAP administration. So unless the state increases its investment in the program, there will have to be a scaling back of SNAP navigators at a time when families need them the most. So our budget ask for NOEP this year is $8.5 million to make sure that we can sustain this network in all parts of the state.
Thanks, Krista. Another shared priority that Krista had mentioned is protecting the SNAP benefits that New Yorkers are entitled to. It's worth noting that New York has been by far the hardest hit state of the nation when it comes to EBT skimming and benefits theft. Over 150,000 families across New York State alone had filed claims for replacement benefits during the 2 years the federal government was providing reimbursement. Unfortunately, however, the federal government has stopped doing so leaving families without recourse. Talk to a food pantry on the ground and they'll tell you this issue is not going away. So what do? Transitioning to more secure chip-enabled EBT cards can help prevent skimming at the source and protect the vital food assistance benefits that New Yorkers are entitled to. States across the nation, including California, Oklahoma, and several others, have begun their transition or considered plans to phase in chip-enabled EBT cards. Next year's budget should include funding for New York State to do so as well. In addition to protecting New Yorkers' SNAP benefits, we need to raise the minimum benefit. Today, over 80,000 New Yorkers who are eligible and participating in SNAP currently receive a benefit amount of less than $1 per day. That is deeply inadequate to afford a month of food. The overwhelming majority of these individuals are seniors, folks living on fixed income, and more than half are women. The minimum SNAP benefit under federal rules today is just $24 per month. Ask yourself, can you really afford a month of food on just $24? The answer is, of course not. By increasing the minimum benefit, we can directly support our seniors and help make New York more affordable. And the benefits of raising SNAP benefits are numerous, including lower rates of poverty and food hardship, boosted spending at grocery stores, farmers markets, and local economies, and improved health outcomes. Next year's budget should include supplemental funding so that every New Yorker is guaranteed a more dignified benefit of at least $100 per month. Another area in which New York State can strengthen SNAP is eliminating its harmful barriers and exclusions. Today, over 700,000 income-eligible New Yorkers are excluded from SNAP for no other reason than their immigration status. Excluded New Yorkers contribute significantly to our state, our society, our economy, our food system, while contributing billions of dollars each year in state and local taxes. To make matters worse, Congress just voted to eliminate SNAP eligibility for refugees, asylees, and other immigrant families, taking food off the tables of around 41,000 New Yorkers. Meanwhile, our state's Child Poverty Reduction Advisory Council, or CPRAC, proposed we do exactly the opposite and expand food assistance for households with children. We agree. Next year's budget should include state funding to protect food assistance for the 41,000 New Yorkers set to lose SNAP access, and also expand, using state dollars, food assistance for families with children.
Good morning, everyone. I want to give a little bit of context on the importance of double up food bucks and some recent updates, being on the front lines of really seeing, especially how the last month has impacted usage of the program and sort of the importance of funding surrounding it. But for those who don't know, Double Up Food Bucks New York is Field and Fork Network's statewide SNAP matching nutrition incentive program, introduced originally in 2014. And for every SNAP dollar spent on eligible fresh fruits and vegetables, shoppers earn an equal amount of double up dollars to buy more produce. In grocery stores, the daily match has increased from an original $5 to a $20 cap per day. And just this summer at farm direct sites like farmers markets and farm stands, we increased the match to $50 per day to meet an increasing need and to help farmers during their peak season with economic opportunities. In summer of 2025, we also scaled into 48 additional Tops Friendly Markets, Market 32, and Price Chopper stores, adding 16 new counties to the program, bringing Double Up to over 107,000 additional SNAP recipients for the first time. Double Up started at farmers markets, but was really designed to flex for a variety of retail formats, which today includes point of sale integration across full service grocery, corner store, farm stand, mobile market, and CSA style models. Because of this flexibility, Double Up currently operates at over 320 locations in 53 counties across New York, and we're on track to be in all 57 counties outside of New York City by mid-2026. The key here is really about utilization, though. Based on current totals, 2025 redemptions will be over 4 times higher than in 2024, growing from over a little of $1 million in 2024 to at least $4.2 million this year. And we project this redemption total will be significantly higher in 2026. This trajectory really proves that when you remove cost as a barrier, SNAP households shift towards purchasing fresh produce at scale. But it only continues if the funding does. Sustained multi-year state investment will help guarantee that the purchasing power that Double Up provides SNAP families can really remain a permanent pillar of New York's food access infrastructure. And thank you all for your support.
In addition to our SNAP priorities, we also want to make sure that New York is bolstering other nutrition programs that help families make ends meet. And WIC is a great example. WIC is the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children. It serves pregnant and postpartum people and children up to age 5, providing healthy food, nutrition education, breastfeeding support, and referrals to other services. As we see these deeply harmful cuts to SNAP and Medicaid, WIC remains a stable source of nutrition and health support for families. About 450,000 New Yorkers currently participate in the program. We've seen a dramatic increase in participation, about 25% over the last 4 years. But we still have about 200,000 more New Yorkers who are eligible but not yet participating. At the same time, our local WIC agencies across the state are struggling with budget shortfalls, staffing shortages that are making it really difficult for them to serve this increased participation. They're operating over their caseloads, they're struggling to hire and retain staff, and we're getting to a point where it's affecting the timeliness and availability of services for families. It's really critical that this year's state budget includes $30 million to help bolster those local WIC agencies' budgets and to support some of the efforts that New York State Department of Health is making to modernize the program, make it easier for folks to access and more efficient.
As Krista alluded to, we know that it's super important for our state to bolster nutrition programs statewide, and that's because even if SNAP is fully mitigated at the state level, we know that that need is going to remain. So moving next to HIPNAP, which is the Hunger Prevention and Nutrition Assistance Program, and Nourish New York. These are two incredible statewide anti-hunger programs that provide funds for food banks, pantries, and community-based organizations to buy and distribute food out to their communities. So first, looking at HIPNAP, this is an incredible program that for over 35 years has made sure that we're allowed to buy food and distribute to communities. But not only that, there are nutrition guidelines that makes sure that this food is also nutritious as it's going out and feeding us. And then additionally, HIPNAP also supports operational needs too. So not just buying the food, but also supporting the storage, the capacity, the transportation that can make sure that it's actually able to be distributed. Moving to Nourish New York, this is another, again, incredible program that's been around since 2020. And not only does it buy food, but it does so by buying directly from local New York-based farmers, growers, and producers. So it's helping to support and uplift New York economies as well, which is really crucial and important. And it also provides pathways for culturally relevant food as well. So again, these are two incredible programs, and they are really just such a lifeline for our communities. We actually did a survey over the summer where we surveyed our network of partner agencies, pantries, community-based organizations, and they described it as a lifeline. They described it as getting fresh, good quality food out to their communities. HIPNAP and Nourish allow them to do so, and in a cost-effective way. Many on that survey said that they could not keep their doors open without this funding. So two incredible programs. And we also know that the demand continues to rise year over year. that we're seeing across our network of food banks, pantries, community-based organizations. We know that compared to pre-pandemic levels, it is up 70% in demand. And we know that with these federal cuts coming down the line, that means that more pantries, more food banks are going to see those spikes in demand happen. And they're going to need to find ways to accommodate new families and meet this growing demand. And so we saw with the government shutdown, this was a perfect example of that. When federal workers had to be furloughed, when SNAP wasn't going out, we saw that demand increase. We saw the straining of resources, but also we saw how our network could band together to help meet that need. Through funding, through us all banding together, we did pop-up distributions. We procured more food, we targeted high needs areas and made sure that we were helping to best meet that need. So we know that our programs work, and we know that HIPNAP and Nourish can be solutions to help meet this need. And in order to do so, we ask in the fiscal year 2027 state budget that both HIPNAP and Nourish be fully funded at $75 million each. So that concludes just the portion where we're talking about a quick overview of all of our priorities for this budget season. And I want to end this section with 3 calls to action. So the first is a bunch of statewide groups have come together to organize our New York State Anti-Hunger Advocacy Day. It includes all of these different priorities that we've talked about, and that's going to be on January 28th from 10 to 4 p.m. at the Albany Capitol Building. Thank you, Eric, for dropping that link in the chat. That is the link to register, and you can do so by December 18th. The second call to action is a statewide anti-hunger sign-on letter that accompanies this, and you can go ahead. That's an organizational sign-on letter and sign on to that. Thank you again, Eric, for dropping that link. Also, the deadline is December 18th. And then lastly, for individuals, this is a click to action petition that you can sign, sending a message to your state representatives, urging them to support these programs. Okay, awesome. I think that is concluding our presentation portion. And so next we are going to turn to hear from some incredible grassroots speakers who have direct experiences with these programs and are going to talk a little bit about why they are so crucial. So I'm first going to turn to Melissa Anderson, who is a community advocate with the Schenectady County Food Council. Thank you, Melissa, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. I am someone who got involved in advocacy a couple of years ago, and it really struck a chord with me because not only have I experienced other people around me dealing with food insecurity, but I've dealt with it myself. So I'm no stranger to food stamps. When I was in high school, my father had a heart attack at 32, lost his business. We had to go on food stamps because my mom was at a factory job, and we were trying to feed 4 children on a factory salary, and a very, very small veterans payment. So it was very, very difficult. And then my mother experienced shame in the grocery store for using those food stamps, and so she stopped. And that was my first experience with it. I come from a family that has always tried very hard to do for ourselves, and we always took that to heart. I'm so sorry. Can you excuse me just one moment, please? Is there any possible way I could come next? Thank you.
No problem at all, Melissa. So next, let's actually move to Will Kleffner, who's the Executive Director at the Cooperstown Food Pantry. Thank you so much, Will, and then we'll hop back to Melissa after.
Thank you so much for having me this morning. My name is Will Kleffner. I am the Executive Director of the Cooperstown Food Pantry in Otsego County, New York, and we serve the entirety of Otsego County. Otsego County has nearly 60,000 residents, with 14% of them being classified as impoverished. Nearly 50% of all residents within Otsego County reach the ALICE threshold, asset limited, income constrained, employed. These are our neighbors who work full-time, often multiple jobs, and yet still struggle to make ends meet. In a rural community like ours, food insecurity comes with unique challenges that urban food banks don't necessarily encounter. Access to reliable transportation is a leading obstacle our neighbors face, with many of our neighbors living in food deserts, traveling upwards of 25 to 30 miles to the nearest grocery store. Additionally, our food pantry has identified a few neighbors who live on access roads that are only maintained 2 to 3 months out of the year, making winter particularly isolating and difficult. Quite frankly, it can be dangerous to even attempt to connect these neighbors with the resources that they need. Additionally, only about half of our pantry patrons reported having regular internet access at home, while often encountering poor or spotty cell phone reception. Members of our community are often required to drive up to 60 miles round trip to utilize our food pantry and other community resources. They're making their rounds in Cooperstown, going to an appointment at our local hospital, going to the grocery store, and then visiting us before heading back home for the day. With just 2 full-time staff members, the Cooperstown Food Pantry runs 7 different programs serving approximately 250 households, roughly 750 people a month. These programs include a Food as Medicine partnership program with our local oncology department to provide medically tailored foods to cancer patients facing food insecurity. We firmly believe that no one should ever have to make the impossible choice of paying for treatment or paying for food. But planned cuts to Medicaid could very well alleviate the participants in our Food as Medicine program from making the impossible choice of paying for food or treatment, as they simply won't be able to afford either. Over the last 3 years, the pantry has faced an 80% increase in need, and as rising costs of living continue to squeeze the very people we serve, more families are walking through our pantry doors for the first time. In 2022, the pantry served a total of 8 new households. So far in 2025, we have served over 400. The challenges do not stop there. Recent cuts to the USDA and the Local Food Procurement Act have nearly doubled our food costs, with the average cost of a canned good at our pantry jumping from 10 cents to 75 cents over the last 9 months. The Regional Food Bank of Northeastern New York anticipates losing upwards of 7 to 9 million pounds of previously contracted food deliveries by year's end. This loss is going to force organizations like ours to scramble for new resources and find creative solutions. I spoke with one neighbor recently who was entirely disabled and unable to work. Under the new SNAP guidelines, her benefits were slashed from $190 a month to just the state minimum. She was also among the 6,500 people in Otsego County who did not receive their SNAP benefits during the government shutdown. And during that shutdown, we experienced a 100 to 150% spike in need. And in one truly heartbreaking case, one neighbor drove 3 hours to seek our services because she had nowhere else to go. Her local pantry simply had no food left to distribute. So, how did we respond? We worked with local farmers to purchase and distribute thousands of pounds of fresh produce. We provided $40 vouchers to our local farmers market for use on SNAP eligible items and provided a $20 Price Chopper gift card as part of a holiday distribution. I am proud to share that we never had to turn anyone away. SNAP cuts don't hurt just our most vulnerable neighbors. They hurt local farmers and retailers who see reduced foot traffic. And as work requirements tighten and cost shifts come into place, supporting our communities has never been more expensive or more essential. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll really appreciate that and really want to highlight exactly as you said, people shouldn't have to choose between one thing or another. They should be able to have their needs met. I see Melissa, you're back on, so I'll hop over to you. And Melissa has been so gracious. She's technically working at the same time, so appreciate her taking time to also do this as well.
Hi, apologies. So sorry to have been interrupted. So as I was saying, I'm not a stranger to food stamps. My first experience was when I was younger. I did everything right to try to get out of the situation where we would need that kind of help. I went to college. My sister and I were the first in our family to get a 4-year degree and then on to a master's degree, each of us. I got a great job. I was doing really well. At one point, I was making close to 6 figures. I had children. And then when they were 2, I was downsized. Through no fault of my own, the company was purchased. A lot of people were let go. I made it through the first round. I lost my job in the second round. I used my retirement. I used my savings. I used my credit cards. I almost lost my house. The one thing that fortunately at this point I did not have to worry about was feeding my children because I had SNAP benefits. And I had 2-year-old twins at the time who were also ironically allergic to wheat and dairy. So for anybody who's faced those specific food exclusions, it makes everything a lot more expensive. So and a lot harder to find in things like food banks and pantries. So when I did finally eventually find a position almost 3 years later, and again, I was working every day at trying to find a position. Um, the job that I got was for $19 an hour in Albany. So I was driving from Schenectady to Albany every day. I took my children to school early to the breakfast program so that one, they could eat, and two, I could be to work on time and work a 40-hour week. However, that dropped my benefits to $23 a month, which was the minimum for at that time. I believe it was 23. Now, that covered about 2 loaves of their specific gluten-free bread. But it wasn't the point of the SNAP benefits at that point. It was the fact that I was still able to get free lunch. And so that's the reason that every 6 months, I would go through the very invasive, demoralizing, dehumanizing process of completing the application, sharing all of my income, my bank accounts, how much I was spending on daycare, which ironically did not count much towards what benefit I could get. And then answering the questions that you have to be available for within a 2-hour window. Fortunately, I was at a job where I could answer those questions during the day. If I had been at a factory job, that would have been impossible. At which point you answer the questions again that you have already answered in your application. And it makes you feel as if you are trying to be caught out because you're like, I've answered these questions. And then you have the fear of, well, what if I don't remember exactly what I wrote down because finances change slightly bit to bit? Am I going to be denied because they think I'm trying to abuse the system? So you do that every 6 months. And I did that in order to get free school lunch. When I got a raise of 25 cents an hour, I lost that $23 a month. So for anybody doing the math, that really doesn't add up to very much. It's less than $500 a year when you're working a 40-hour job. Losing the free school lunch meant that I now had to come up with money to pay for 2 meals a day at the school for 2 children, and that was $60 a week. And so for many years after that, I did that. And the amount of anxiety every single week of trying to come up with that $60 to pay for the food at my children's school was stressful and heartbreaking. And at the same time, I now was also trying to cover the additional costs of food at home because I had no SNAP benefit at all. I still don't get SNAP benefits. Fortunately, we now have the free school lunch programs through New York State, which has helped millions of children to eat every day. It puts a little bit less stress off parents like myself. I still struggle to feed my children. I go to a food pantry, free produce at the community center in Rotterdam every Friday. I have arranged with my current job that I work extra during the week so I can leave 15 minutes early to get there in time to get the food. I use that to supplement wherever we can. It's still not easy. We did get the summer SNAP meals for the kids, and I've been super grateful for that. They call it summer, but I got it in October. I am not what many people think of when you think of SNAP recipients. I'm not what it should look like. A lot of people are in my situation, and a lot of people look like me. A lot of people are there because something happened that they couldn't help, they couldn't prevent, and are still struggling to get past. It's been 10 years since I lost that job. I still am struggling to feed my family in many situations. This is not something that's easily fixed. Hunger doesn't go away overnight. Getting a job doesn't mean you can suddenly feed your family when it's suddenly making a heck of a lot less, and you have to pay for additional transportation costs and daycare costs. It's something that I don't want my kids to have to need when they're older, but I want it to be there for them if they do need it. I see my neighbors and friends who are standing in line with me in the 20-degree weather or colder every Friday afternoon to try to get some produce and some salad and maybe some apples to go home to our families. SNAP is there to help people, and I hope that we can bring it to a point where it's more helpful. It is something that can actually make a difference in people's regular weekly lives. And I'm happy to answer any questions about my experience. I think that there are more of us than we know, and there's more people probably around you that are in a similar situation and maybe just are afraid to talk about it. So that's my story. I'm grateful you allowed me to share. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Really, really appreciate you sharing that. There's a comment from the audience that says, please send gratitude from attendees for your powerful story, recognizing this is so courageous and vulnerable for you to share. So just want to echo that and say that I'm sure everyone, thank you, Cody, for sending that comment, but everyone I'm sure feels the same way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and next I'll turn to Carrie Madigan, who is a Double Up Food Bucks ambassador. Hi, Carrie. Sorry, are folks able to hear Carrie? I'm not sure if we're able to hear you, Carrie. If, in the interest of time, while we figure out that audio, do we want to potentially pass it on to Brian?
I think that works, Alyssa. We can move on to the legislative panel for now. I know there's some folks that have a hard stop, and then Carrie, if we can figure out your audio, would love to circle back to you later on.
Great. Thank you, Will, Carrie, Melissa, particularly Melissa. I want to thank you for sharing your vulnerability and echo what Alyssa and Cody have both said. So with that said, moving into our panel of elected officials, we're excited to be joined by an incredible group of legislators who really played a leadership role in recent years tackling hunger, poverty, and food insecurity in the New York State Legislature. So please join me in welcoming Assembly Member Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, who represents New York's 34th Assembly District in Queens. Assembly Member, thanks for joining us today. We're also thrilled
Thank you for having me.
We're also thrilled to welcome Senator Michelle Hinchey, representing New York's 41st Senate District in the Hudson Valley and the Catskill region. Welcome, Senator Hinchey.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And rounding out our panel is Assemblymember Khalil Anderson from New York's 31st Assembly District in Queens. Assemblymember, thanks for joining us today.
I'll give that. Thanks for having me, Ryan. Good to see my two colleagues here as well. Good morning.
And so quick note that Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas has a hard stop at 11:15. So we're going to try to get through all of our questions as quickly as possible. Let's get into it. So first question for all of our panelists. We'll start with Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas. Could you introduce yourself, your district, and why tackling hunger is a priority for you in this upcoming budget?
Great. Thank you again. And thank you to all the advocates that help us address hunger in New York State. And thank you, Melissa, for sharing your story, because it really exemplifies the lived experiences of so many of our neighbors, and we're here to fight for you. So my name is Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I proudly represent District 34, which includes the Queens neighborhoods of Jackson Heights, East Elmhurst, Corona, Woodside, and Astoria, otherwise known as the epicenter of the COVID pandemic. During those really dark days in the early start of the pandemic, we saw lines at food pantries wrapped around blocks and blocks and blocks. And quite honestly, we still see lines for food pantries wrapped around blocks and blocks and blocks. But we really understood and saw how there was a shining of the problem that long existed in New York State and in Queens and in New York City through the eyes of the pandemic. So I'm really committed to fighting food insecurity, to ensuring that everyone has access to nutritious and healthy foods. And I was so proud, alongside Senator Hinchey, to successfully achieve universal school meals, a free healthy breakfast, free healthy lunch for every single school child in New York State. So really great to be here alongside the senator and Assemblymember Anderson, who leads the Food Justice Committee. I know there's a different name for it, but is a champion alongside so many of us in the legislature.
Thanks so much, Assembly Member. And just to really acknowledge the historic feat of New York State becoming the 9th state in the nation to provide free universal breakfast and lunch, no questions asked, a tremendous accomplishment. Next up, Senator Hinchey.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here and for having me, but more importantly, for all of your work and advocacy in this space. I think why this is so important was so perfectly encapsulated by Melissa. No one should have to fear how to put food on the table. No one should have to worry about if the food they are eating or their children are eating or their family is eating is healthy and nutritious. We live in what was the breadbasket of the country, New York State, especially the Hudson Valley, where I represent. But we were the breadbasket of the country in the founding of our country. And we have to make sure that we are living by those ideals to connect people to the food that we are growing, because everyone deserves that. It should not be a luxury on if you get to eat good quality food or not. It should not be based on what your income is, on if you get to eat good quality food. It should not be based on where you live that you get to eat good quality food. This is something that should be ubiquitous and that we are collectively fighting for. And as I said, I'm a senator for the Hudson Valley. I represent the 41st District, which spans 4 counties, most of Ulster, half of Dutchess, all of Columbia, and all of Greene. And we have a number of food deserts, and we also represent a number of some of the best farms in the country. I also have the privilege of chairing the Agriculture Committee, which we renamed the Agriculture and Food Committee, to better connect the dots for people on what it is that we're talking about when we talk about agriculture. And when I won our seat in 2020, I actually requested to represent this committee because it was clear that we needed to and could do a better job, both of supporting our farmers who are growing this food, because it's an incredibly precarious business, especially New York farmers that don't get all of the support that some of the larger farms get. Our farms are still small, mid-sized, family-owned farms. But we also need to connect those dots. And that's a responsibility of the legislature. It's a responsibility of government to be able to connect those dots for people. And so I really appreciate all of the work that all of you are doing. And it's an honor to be able to be in these trenches with you all, to be able to deliver things like universal school meals, but to make sure more people have access to the food that they deserve.
Thanks so much, Senator Hinchey. Assemblymember Anderson, you're up.
Ryan, thank you so much. And I want to thank Melissa for sharing her story. You know, that is the unfortunate reality for many, many New Yorkers in the richest state, in the richest country in the history of the world. We have people that are going hungry or doing and taking extraordinary steps to prevent themselves from going hungry. That's the situation that we're faced with. I'm excited to have recently been appointed to chair the Food Farm Nutrition Policy Task Force within the Assembly, where we've been seeking to tackle a number of issues with regard to food insecurity and to make sure that food is used as fuel and support for our families and communities and neighbors, not as a roadblock in terms of providing the things that are needed. So I'm grateful for my partnership with Assemblywoman Gonzalez Rojas and with Senator Hinchey and with many of the other folks that have done critical work to keep food insecurity at the top of many folks' minds. We some of the work that I've done both locally and with my colleagues has centered around SNAP skimming and fighting now to prevent those who unfortunately lose their benefits due to no fault of their own. So that's another battle that we still have to continue to push up the hill. There's nothing good about the federal cuts that are happening, but I do see something positive that could come out of it, and that's the state finally realizing that it has to upgrade its antiquated system in which to feed New Yorkers. So we may get SNAP chips out of this crisis, right? We don't want to waste a good crisis. Well, it's not a good crisis, but we don't want to waste a crisis. That antiquated system has prevented us from really being able to ensure that those who are skimmed of their SNAP benefits can be made whole. So like that's something that we're going to be looking forward to working on next session. But as I close, I have to say that this is a personal issue for me, being somebody that was a survivor of Superstorm Sandy, where food couldn't be prepared because we were without electricity for several weeks after the storm had hit the peninsula where I represent in the Rockaways. But also being a SNAP recipient for all of my life, from the time I was born and even when I was in the womb, WIC assistance. This is how I was able to survive to the day I was sworn into office. I've been on SNAP benefits. And those benefits really helped my mom, who was raising 3, 4 kids on her own, and being able to feed us, clothe us, and house us, where expenses and costs continue to go up around us. And so SNAP benefits provided and continue to provide the opportunity for people to purchase food in a dignified and an autonomous way, where they can have their power back. And so we have to do everything that we can to protect that program, because that program is how we're going to continue to feed New Yorkers and to address the issues that we're seeing across our state and across our nation. So I'm grateful to be here this morning.
And thank you, Assembly Member, for both joining us, but also for sharing that personal experience you have with both SNAP and WIC. I think one of the common threads across all of the responses was the fact that, food security really is about dignity for folks. So whether we're talking about in Queens, the epicenter of the COVID pandemic, or in the Hudson Valley, upstate, the breadbasket of the state, this is about dignity for all New Yorkers. So shifting to SNAP a little bit. So Assemblymember Gonzalez-Rojas, as we've discussed, HR 1 included massive, unprecedented cuts to SNAP through expanded work reporting requirements, cost shifting onto states, and restrictions for SNAP eligibility, speaking of refugees, asylees, and other immigrant New Yorkers. What are some opportunities you see for New York State to really step up in the face of these federal cuts and protect and strengthen SNAP for New York families?
You're muted, Jessica.
All right, 5 years of this, you think I'd get it? I think, the presentation that you all provided earlier as part of this this overview was really nailed it on the head. We have to do everything to ensuring that we continue to have a SNAP navigation program, which is the Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, NOEP. Every year I carry the letter to make sure that the budget sustains this program. And this year we're going to be asking for 8.5 million. We need to ensure that we're looking at increasing the minimum benefit. Melissa's story highlighted the fact that at $23 a month, you cannot feed a family. And in fact, myself and Senator Rachel May, who's a co-sponsor, the sponsor of the bill in the Senate, we went food shopping to assess how much food can you get with $23 a month. And I remember it was a gallon of milk, it was a dozen eggs, it was cereal, and that was blueberries. And that was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So we know those costs have skyrocketed. And even that bread basket was about $23.16. So it went over the $23. We have to increase the minimum benefit. Cost of living is extraordinary in New York, across the whole state. And New Jersey passed a bill and it has successfully implemented as increase in the SNAP minimum benefit on their end. They went up to $95. We should go up to 100 because we are better than New Jersey. Sorry to all the New Jerseyans, but we are. And as Khalil mentioned, we have to address the SNAP skimming crisis. As much as we continue to fight and want to protect our SNAP dollars, if the EBT card that people are using to purchase food is vulnerable, as it is, we're going to see the loss of that money. These are taxpayer money. It impacts not just those that need the food, but it actually impacts the local businesses that rely on SNAP for their local economy. So I have a bill too that would upgrade the SNAP card or the EBT card to include EMV chip technology. Right now it's a magnetic swipe, again, very, very vulnerable to skimming. And we've seen about 150,000 cases in New York State. The federal government up until December 20th, 24 had a reimbursement program that ended. But at that time, we reimbursed about $40 million. So we know the problem has continued. We know people aren't reporting it, so we think actually the numbers are higher. But until we move to an EMV chip card, which is 87% more secure than a magnetic swipe card, we're going to continue to see this problem persist. So this is the year to do it because some of the SNAP regulations at the federal level go into effect in the next fiscal year. So we want to ensure that we're able to take advantage of the fact that the federal government is on the hook to reimburse us up to 50% of the cost of that transition. So there is urgency, largely because of this problem persists, but urgency if New York State wants to do this most efficiently. So those are like the three things that we're really fighting for. And I know with all of your support and those of the legislators on this call, we'll get it done.
Absolutely. Thank you, Assembly Member. This truly is a year for urgent action. And so thinking about urgent action, Senator Hinchey, thanks to you and to Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas's persistent advocacy, universal school meals passed in this year's budget and rolled out across the state, starting this school year. What does this historic investment mean for students and families across the state, and how do we build on this momentum?
Thank you. And I want to thank the whole coalition, but especially my partner, Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas, for just really an incredible effort to get this done over a number of years and not taking, 80% as a win. We were deeply committed to getting to 100% for every school district and for every child because we could leave no one behind. This investment was critical. And I think, again, not to I'm sorry, Melissa, to keep putting you on the spot here, but it just encapsulates how critical a program like this is and what a lifeline it is for families and communities. Not to mention these thresholds that we have are so old. And so we haven't updated these kind of like fiscal cliffs in decades. And so even if you don't qualify for universal or for school meals and for the support in school to get your child that free breakfast and lunch, it doesn't mean you're not struggling if you're right on the edge. And especially with costs increasing, more and more people are struggling to be able to put food on the table. The other part of that coin is the stigma that went with free breakfast and lunch. It shouldn't exist, and yet it does. And especially when you're kids, when you're growing up and you're in a school system, if someone's getting something that you don't have, you don't know what that is. And it kind of pits kids against each other and it puts them in buckets instead of allowing children to just be kids and be able to work together and build relationships again, regardless of, what their economic status might be, and to also not have to worry about it. We heard so many stories of kids that were eligible for free breakfast and lunch, but were choosing not to get it because they didn't want to be made fun of, right? And they didn't want to have to deal with the questions from their peers. And so they would go all day hungry, which means you can't learn. You may have emotional issues, right? Everybody gets a little bit angry when you're hungry. You may not be able to focus. You can't actually learn. And so we're just continuing a cycle of keeping people down and not being able to live to their true potential. And so making sure that we had free breakfast and lunch for all students, removing the question mark and the concern from a family, and also being able to let kids just be kids and focus on, do they like math? Are they more creative? Would they rather take another art class? Can they actually put that together in science and physics? Like, that's what we should be focusing on. And that's what our teachers should be focusing on. They shouldn't be focusing on spending their hard-earned dollars having a snack drawer because they know the kids that may not be able to have food that day. That's not what it's wonderful that we have that catchment and our teachers are stepping up in that way, but they shouldn't have to. And so having universal school meals now for all students is a social safety net program as well. And so this now, while we have cuts from the federal government that are making it harder for folks to be able to put food on the table, at least families know that during the school year, their kids will get 2 good meals a day. Now what we need to do going into this year is we need to make sure that every school across the board has farm fresh, healthy food. And that's what we're feeding our kids. And so we're working again with the coalition and many others to make sure that the farm to school program is as robust that it could be, that it works for all of our school districts, and that we're actually getting good food to our kids. One thing I want to mention too that was in the comments for the remarks, I think Krista, it was you, was about the data that the federal government and USDA has decided to cut. One way that you end programs like SNAP, if you can't do it legislatively, is you cut the data so you can't see the need. We all know the need is there, but if you can't prove the need, it becomes a lot easier to cut the funding. And we cannot let that happen. And so we actually have a bill for the state with Assemblymember Carrie Warner to start collecting that USDA hunger data ourselves so that we can continue to prove the need for these programs and continue to fight for funding and even more funding than we've needed at the state level. And we're encouraging all states to track that and to do it, because in 3 years from now, feels like a lifetime, but in 3 years from now, when we have a new administration and we have to build back the federal government and build back the programs that have been gutted just to cause harm and to be cruel to communities across this country, we have to be able to feed that data quickly back to the federal government and be a party to building that back. And so that's something we'll be pushing this year as well.
Thank you, Senator Hinchey. Assemblymember Anderson, you've made it a point, really, especially in your new role as chair of the task force on food, farm, and nutrition policy, really to bring together advocates, nonprofits, and community-based providers on solutions to really end hunger and food insecurity, also food apartheid. What are some of the themes you've heard from those discussions?
Yeah, so we did it 2 ways. In my district, I organized a food justice working group where we're meeting with food providers on the ground to try to figure out what some of the challenges are for them and get folks to cross-pollinate and share resources, but also to help me be more of an effective legislator in terms of what laws we need to either correct, fix, or even create to make sure that the programs that do exist are feeding New Yorkers as they're intended. So some of the common things that we've heard from that group was the issues with regard to how many people they're seeing show up to pantries, how many people they're seeing with regard to being able to access different products, eggs, chicken, or different types of poultry, meat. Like those are some of the issues that came up, and what the affordability looks like for those items, because they have many times when you're dealing with food pantry providers and the entities of the like, they purchase in bulk. And when you see illegal tariffs being placed on some of these products, like we saw from the circus in Washington, D.C., you then now impact what pantries can actually provide or food entities can provide. And so you have a lot of mutual aid that occurs, which is helpful, and it serves as a in the gap measure. But certainly we want to make sure that the systems are working in terms of feeding New Yorkers. So that's what we've seen in that group. And of course, within the task force, this had never been done before, but what we have done with the task force, in my time serving, is we have had monthly meetings, organizing meetings, strategy sessions to figure out how to push our initiatives forward, rather than we're treating it like a full standing committee in the sense that we need to meet frequently. We need to discuss legislative concepts, ideas, bills, and we need to do so in a way, and Michelle can appreciate, Senator Hinchy can appreciate this, but we need to do so in a bipartisan way, because there are some folks on the other side of the aisle that don't realize that the policies that are coming out of Washington are going to affect farmers and have already affected farmers and their ability to even provide and supplement to programs like Nourish New York, and like NIF, which are programs that we really know are helpful. So these are some of the common themes that we've heard from those different subsets or groups that we've been organizing. And as we go into next year, we're going to look at, again, just like Assemblywoman Gonzalez Rojas said, how do we protect the vulnerable New Yorkers like Melissa and like many others who rely on the SNAP program from skimming? We're also going to try to figure out how we can remediate the harm that has been done on the federal level. I'm excited to hear that Senator Hinchy has a bill to require the state to start collecting that data. We are circulating a letter similar to that. We're circulating a letter to the comptroller to see if he can do some of that auditing now to see where hunger exists across our state. So it's good that we're great minds on this call, great minds think alike, and just making sure that we bridge those initiatives together, because there's so many ways that we can feed New Yorkers. Again, in the richest state, in the richest country in the history of the world, we shouldn't have folks who go hungry.
That's absolutely right. And thank you, Assemblymember Anderson, for your work in really convening and bringing together, advocates, community-based groups. It's going to be important work as we move forward. So going back to Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas, even if New York State does everything in its power to mitigate harm from the SNAP cuts, of course, there will still be new barriers to food security for many New Yorkers amid rising cost of living. How can New York State bolster other food and nutrition programs such as WIC to help fill this gap?
Yeah, so WIC is a really important program, particularly in this moment, because we know that the eligibility still remains for all community members, including those who are undocumented. But as presented earlier, the agencies are underfunded. The outreach program does not have enough resources because we have, I think it was 200,000 people eligible that are not enrolled. And these are programs that help women, children, and families. And it's so critical to make sure that our youngest New Yorkers have the nourishment and the tools and resources to thrive in New York State. So we're going to be pushing for a $30 million investment. The other thing I actually meant to say earlier was the population that's being cut out of the federal SNAP program. It's, refugees, asylees, it's survivors of violence. And the Trump administration is cruelly cutting out those populations from the SNAP program. We in New York should make up that gap, right? We estimate to include those folks alongside undocumented families with children, that we're looking at a $244 million investment. And again, an investment in food and nourishment in our state is critical, and an investment in nourishment of our youngest New Yorkers is an investment in our future. So there's still a lot we can do on top of fixing this EBT card, on top of increasing the SNAP minimum benefit, ensuring that we're investing in programs like WIC to keep it strong and solvent is critical in this moment. And even going beyond the populations that we currently serve to make sure that we can feed all those families in need is absolutely a critical priority in the year to come.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Assembly Member. So Senator Hinchy, earlier you had mentioned healthy food access as one of those core priorities that you have in the year ahead. What are the impacts, thinking about other state programs, what are the impacts you've seen here in New York State from nutrition incentives like Double Up Food Bucks? And also, what is the role in other hunger relief programs such as HIPNAP and Nourish New York really to fill in as that solid backstop amidst these cuts to SNAP?
They're critical and they're really good programs. The Double Up Food Bucks program is actually a pretty small program. We only put in a handful of millions of dollars. It's like $3 million to this program. And yet it's one of the programs that provides people dignity to be able to go to a store similarly and buy the food that they want. And make sure that it's nutritious and healthy. It's also helps us create a circular economy, right? It keeps our tax dollars local. It bolsters the farm businesses. It bolsters money back into our communities. And it's just a smart program. For us in SD 41, we added two Double Up Food Bucks, I should say, added two Price Chopper locations in our district, one in Saugerties and one in Catskill this year. And the use of the Double Up Food Bucks program went up an average of 94%. That's incredible. And we should be making it easier and expanding programs like Double Up Food Bucks. And so something going into this year, especially again, as we see these cuts to SNAP, the existing programs that we have are going to be really important to support and bolster. We need to, work as hard as we can to backfill as much as we can, but we can target and help the same communities by increasing dollars in programs that exist that will have each dollar go a lot further as well, like the Double Up Food Bucks program. And so that's critical. We're all fighting for $75 million for the Nourish and HIPNAP programs because those are also programs that have proven really successful. Just last week, I was with the Regional Food Bank of Hudson Valley and People's Place, which is one of our great pantries, and Hepworth Farms, which is one of our historic farms in our community, announcing the launch of a new pilot program for micro purchasing using Nourish New York dollars. And what they're doing, they've launched in 3 counties across the state: Ulster County, Rensselaer County, and one other county, I think Putnam County, one other county. And basically what they're doing is using some dollars to help give money to farms and to bring that food in small scales to the food pantries. Often right now, they're using truckloads of food. And so that actually can't, a lot of farms can't necessarily fill a tractor trailer load, right? So we're looking at smaller farms, more diverse farms, younger farmers, people who are trying to get into the trade, who are starting their new business, who are growing culturally relevant food, and who are really coming back to the land. We want to help them. They also want to get their food into food banks and food pantries because those are the people that they want to serve. And so using this micro purchasing program will actually now be able to build those connections, which will be a new market for our local and small farmers and diverse farmers to be able to grow and expand and plan what they want to grow into the future, while ensuring that people who need food, whether it's the consistent way that they get food or they've fallen on hard times, are able to get good food into their families and into their kitchens and onto their tables. And so we at the state have a responsibility right now to be creative too in the way that we're thinking about the programs that exist and allocating more dollars. One thing I'll add too that we'll be pushing this year with Assemblymember Mikhail Salages is a constitutional right to food. We a couple years ago were able to successfully pass a constitutional right to clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment, and that has been critical in making sure that we have clean water and we're supporting, especially disadvantaged communities, to have healthier air, right, and to actually live with dignity and a good quality of life. While we're seeing these attacks at the federal level, it's never been more clear that access to food is quite literally on the chopping block. And so we as a state have a responsibility to ensure that. And so we should have a right to food in our state. Maine is the only other state in the country who has that right now. And so we should be following suit and helping lead in New York to ensure that New Yorkers don't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from, and also give us the backbone and the reasoning to strengthen these programs, even when the federal government abdicates their responsibility to help communities. So the programs that we have are really important, and we're looking to be even more creative going into this session.
Thanks, Senator. And shout out Maine for really leading that advocacy around the right to food. Assemblymember Anderson, I want to come to you, but first, knowing that Assemblymember Gonzalez
Thank
Rojas has a hard
you.
stop at 11:15, I want to turn it to you with a final question. So knowing that the decisions made in Albany in a couple months are going to directly impact the lives of millions of New Yorkers, what's a call to action you have for everyone here on this call listening in today?
Call the governor. Please call the governor. Actually, the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian task force had a meeting with the governor. This was at the top of the agenda in terms of the EBT cards in particular, because there was such an urgent financial need given the federal fiscal timeline. But these are really critical things, and when we again nourish our communities, we're developing the future of the state. And we're helping the economy. I think many of us pointed out, and Senator Hinchey pointed out how important this is to build a circular economy, to help our farmers, our New York farmers, to help the local businesses. In my community, it's the bodegas and the small grocers that really benefit from programs like SNAP and these other programs and the farmers markets. So please call the governor. Please sign the letter that's being circulated. I hope to see you at the Advocacy Day in Albany, but please don't give up. This is actually a bipartisan issue. I have Republicans and Democrats on almost all my bills regarding food security. And it's really critical that we underscore this as a human rights issue and not any sort of policy issue, because it's quite popular across the state. We heard the outpouring of support and anger towards the Trump administration when they cut the benefits in November. And there's a lot of energy to fight what's happening at the federal level. But here in New York, we can really solve critical problems and make sure that we're shoring up food security for all New Yorkers. So thank you again. I'm so sorry I have to jump off, but really grateful for this conversation, grateful for the leadership of all the organizations at the front lines and all the community members, and of course, my incredible colleagues who are here. Oh, I just want to give one shout out. Assemblymember Marcella Matenis has a bill that would create a fund to help the families impacted by skimming that were cut out from the federal program when it ended in December of 2024. So again, we know skimming has continued, but there's been no mechanism to get reimbursement for those lost funds. So we're committed to creating a fund here in New York. I have a bill that would amend social service laws to do that. And Assemblymember Martinez has a bill to create that fund. And we hope to fund it at $15 million in the upcoming budget. So let's make all those asks and let's make all those demands to keep New York healthy. Thank you all.
Thanks so much for joining us, Assemblymember. And y'all heard the Assemblymember hit the phones. We're going to really need a big year of constituent advocacy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you all
today. So, Assemblymember Anderson, as chair of the task force, you really have the responsibility of compiling policies and recommendations to really improve food security, nutrition assistance, and agricultural practices across the state. So how can some of the policies that we've talked about today help New York meet those goals?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that question, Ryan, and I'm thankful to Assemblywoman Gonzalez Rojas. I know she had to jump for all the work that she does. I think that there's several ways to tackle that. Number one, just as my colleagues have both said, it's a bipartisan issue. And so while we've been using the task force as an opportunity to push our folks on the other side of the aisle to see this as the same, right? And to put their money where their mouth is, but also the relationships that they have either in Washington or elsewhere to ensure that the critical programs that help their constituents, which is our state, be able to continue to feed families. So we have done several bipartisan letters to Congress to urge, our folks in Washington to support certain programs, particularly when I look at HR 4782, that's the Farm Bill extension. We did a sign-on letter to push our congressional delegation to make sure that language makes it in, which is so important. We wanted to continue to push to make sure that legislation would help like nonprofits, groups and organizations and municipal institutions to make sure that New York-based food and produce can come from folk locally sourced. That's what we colloquially known as the NIF program. These are entities that help to make sure that we can get food on the table for New Yorkers. And so we know that this is going to be a long-standing state federal dance, if you will, in making sure that the feds fund the programs that they fund and the state does what it needs to do to fund the programs that we know we need. But I think the challenge, and so to answer that question, I think the challenge is where are the power players in terms of a certain issue area, and how do we appeal to those folks to see, appeal to their self-interest really, to see, that this is an issue for New Yorkers with regard to the issue that we're talking about, the issue of the day, which is food insecurity, and making sure people are able to afford to put food on their table. We see the economy changing in so many different ways. We saw the Fed cut interest rates, like we're looking at a variety of different things, but just as the Assemblywoman had described, the costs continue to rise with groceries. I saw a poll that said groceries are up, or the grocery basket, if you will, is up 2.7% year to date. That means New Yorkers, Americans, New Yorkers alike, are paying more for the same product. That is a real challenge. And so those are the ways and strategies we're going to use next session to continue to push this understanding that it's bipartisan, but I don't know if I can say bilateral, but up and down, federal, state, if you will, to make sure that these programs are at the center.
Well, thank you, Assembly Member, for your work leading that task force. I know all of the advocates on the call here look forward to continuing the partnership in the year ahead. So we are coming up. We've got about 10 minutes left. So we figure let's go right to that concluding question. Senator Hinchey, for the over 100, nearly 200 attendees who joined here today, what's that call to action you have for folks? How can we get New York State to really step up in this critical moment?
Thank you. And of course, at this defining moment, my cat Elwin has decided that he wants to also be an anti-hunger advocate, and he is here with us. So he is right off screen, but you may see him in 20 seconds because there's only so much battling I can do here. I think the most important thing, I echo the sentiments of the Assembly member. We have to call all of our colleagues, call the governor's office, and let them know that this is really a critical issue and that we have an opportunity here to really step up in the way that we should, in the way that we need to, and invest in the programs that exist. And really show that this is something that we care about, and we care about all New Yorkers. I think we also need to call the members in the majority in DC. We have to call their offices, even if you're not in their district. Listen, they represent all of New York. And so they're the ones in the room who are and have direct line to the people who are making these decisions, and it impacts their constituents just as much as ours. And so they have to hear from us, and they have to know that this is wrong. And so putting pressure on our Congress members, but especially those in the majority. And three, I'll say it's really difficult to watch what's happening and to be experiencing what's happening with the choices that are being made at the federal level. But know that we will get through this. We are fighting with you to make sure that New York is a safe place, that it is a place that fights for people, and that it will not take the cruelty and the ridiculous and terrible policy choices that only support the people at the top, that don't take into account the rest of the people living in our country, and especially here in New York. We will not take this lying down, and we will make sure that we are standing up for everyone. And so we appreciate your advocacy. Keep calling, talk to your friends and neighbors, share stories. That's really what's important. Is we can spout data all day and we need it, but it's the human stories which are really important to actually be able to communicate what is happening, and that it doesn't become abstract. It's real and it's local. So share the stories, talk to each other, and continue to advocate both at the state and federal level.
Thanks so much, Senator Hinchey. Assemblymember Anderson, what's your call to action for folks tuning in today?
Absolutely. Number one, just as we heard from Senator Hinchey, calling our offices, calling our leaders too, calling the Senate Majority Leader, calling the Assembly Speaker, during budget session to say that these priorities are important. Now, we are encouraging that because that's going to help us to make sure that we get the pressure that's on, and also calling the governor, right? Her office, their public relations hotline where people can call in and leave voicemails. Like, all of these are ways for us to push the issue that food insecurity is a very, very serious thing. We've already seen that the federal government is willing to tell New York to drop dead when it is with regard to our food security and our ability to feed our neighbors. So that's number one. Number two, I encourage all New Yorkers, whether you do so on record or whether you do so anonymously, please share your stories like Melissa so graciously did today, because that will help legislators like us and legislators in Washington realize that there's a face to the name of every single struggle that goes into feeding New Yorkers. And that while many of the programs in the minds of Washington serves only poor Black and brown and Asian New Yorkers or Americans, there are folks in middle America. There are folks in white America. There are folks in rural America. There are folks in the Jewish community. There are folks in the Muslim community that are struggling with food insecurity. As I'm talking, I'm down here at a conference in Mississippi, one of the poorest states in the nation, a state that relies on the program that's not a majority, minority, or even close to its state. And the reality of it is that when folk in Washington and even folk in our body realize that this issue is all encompassing and it doesn't have a color, gender, or creed, then they will understand that food is what will not just fuel our communities, but also fuel our future. And so I would say those are the two main, calls to action to all of our folks. Collect your stories and push your leaders. That is going to be key and critical. And pick the issue that you want to put all your weight into. And I understand that many of the folks on the call, maybe working class folks, can't get to a rally, can't get to a demonstration, or can't, write a letter. But everybody can contribute something to this soup that we're creating here, right? You don't have celery, no problem. Somebody has carrots. You don't have garlic, somebody has the chicken broth. Everybody can contribute to this soup to make it as good as it can be and make New York the state that can and must end hunger and show as a model to the rest of the nation that we can do it again in the richest country. In the richest state, in the richest country in the history of the world. We shouldn't have folks going hungry. And it is because of greed and a lack of care and willpower that we do so today. And so we can make changes in that way by fighting as hard as we can and staying focused on the issue.
Thank you, Assemblymember Anderson, Senator Hinchey. Thank you both, and thank you, Assemblymember Gonzalez Rojas, who's left already. This concludes our panel of elected officials, but on behalf of our organizations and all who are on this call, thank you for your work to really advance food as a human right in Albany. We look forward to all working together in the year ahead. Just as a quick note, unfortunately, we were not able to hear back from Carrie, so we are going to try to get some either testimonial or some comments included in a follow-up email for attendees. That concludes the 2025 forum. on hunger and food insecurity. Thank you all for joining us here today. As a reminder, please, if you're an organization, join our sign-on letter to Governor Hochul and to leadership. That letter closes on December 18th, end of day. We will follow up, make sure you have that link. Also, please, everyone feel invited and encouraged to join us in Albany on January 28th. It's a Wednesday. We will also follow up with that registration link as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, remember, whether you're an advocate or an organization, a food bank or a food pantry, or you're just someone here, you care about the issues or you have lived experience. At the end of the day, we're all constituents and we all have a right to petition our government to advance the policies that we want to see. So please make sure we'll follow up with a simple click to action link, but please, as all of the legislators mentioned, be engaging your representatives, be engaging leadership, and let them know that this is a priority for you. Also, it's an election year, so they may care a little bit extra what constituents have to say. Thank you all for joining us here today. We look forward to continuing the work together, and we'll follow up with all of this information in email. Thanks so much. Remember, together in New York, we can end hunger.